Top 10 most shocking WrestleMania match outcomes. We are down to number 6. And when I think of WrestleMania, this is the match that I think of. If Hogan-Andre is the biggest WrestleMania match of all time, and I don't mean business-wise, I mean just big-time, epic WrestleMania feel. And I guess some people might argue Rock Austin from WrestleMania X7. But if number 1 is Hogan-Andre, then this match here is right behind that one at number 2. And that is Hulk Hogan against the Ultimate Warrior from WrestleMania VI. And it almost didn't happen. Hogan had filmed the movie No Holds Barred, which came out the year before. They brought in the actor who played Zeus, Tiny Lister, in the film. They brought him in to wrestle. This was their way of sort of promoting the film at the same time. We're going to bring the guy who plays Zeus into the company and we'll incorporate him into a storyline that at the same time allows us to promote this movie that we did. Now, he didn't wrestle a lot, but they brought him in to work a few pay-per-view matches. I'll be nice and say that he was very limited in what he could do. It certainly wasn't his fault if people had higher expectations for him, because I don't know that he had any wrestling training at all. And so, clearly, he was not very good at it. I mean, even as a kid, he was a scary dude. He was very scary to look at. But he couldn't do much in the ring. I knew that even then. All he did was pound his chest. It's like, how many times can one guy beat his chest, and beat himself in the course of a match? I mean, every 5 seconds, he's beating himself. But he was an actor. He wasn't a wrestler. But he looked the part. And there were at least thoughts given. There was a thought given to a Hulk Hogan versus Zeus main event at WrestleMania. Thankfully, that's all it was a thought, a passing thought. That's not even the worst idea they ever had. That came the year after, when Vince wanted to turn Tugboat heel and make him Sheik Tugboat against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 7 to play off the whole U.S.-Iraq thing. He ended up going with Sergeant Slaughter, which was only marginally better. But imagine that, Sheik Tugboat. I can't even imagine that. But the way they set this up was actually still memorable to this day. Was this one sequence in the Royal Rumble match in 1990. And it came down at one point to Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, the two biggest babyface stars in the company, one-on-one for the very first time. And they were doing it to test how the fans would react to the two biggest stars squaring off. The key here was to make sure that neither man got booed, because otherwise this wasn't going to work. This is according to Bruce Pritchard. He says, look, the idea is that you don't want either one of these guys being booed, because if it looks like they're going to side with Hogan over Warrior, or side with, which would be even worse, side with Warrior over Hogan, forget about it. It's like the old story about doing the Snake Pit in '86 with Hogan and Jake, which has never ever been seen. That video has never been released. I think there is a Snake Pit segment on YouTube somewhere with Hulk and Jake, but that's not the one. But it's the one at that TV taping where he laid out Hogan with a DDT and got cheered. And Vince said, "No, we're not going to air this. We're not going to program these two together." And we never got a Hogan Jake the Snake program because of that. Because the people cheered when Hogan got laid out. And this was in '86. Hogan was at his peak in '86, his peak of popularity. And he got, I don't know if it was so much him being booed, but he got cheered for being laid out. I guess whatever town that was, I guess was a smart city. People would say that today. That was in '86. Well, they 86'd that angle real quick, and we never got to see it. So that was the key here. How are the fans going to react? And both men got cheered. The place went nuts. I went nuts. That was awesome. That whole sequence as a kid, watching them crisscross and the double clothesline, just seeing the two of them face to face, nose to nose like that was exciting. But both guys got cheered. This reminds me of the '94 Royal Rumble match where they had the double elimination with Bret Hart and Lex Luger. And they first announced Luger the winner, and he got cheers, but there was some boos mixed in. And then another referee said, no, it was Bret Hart who won, and he got massive cheers. And they did that as a test. There's not a doubt in my mind that they did that as a test to see which one of the two the fans liked more. Clearly, they liked Bret more than Luger, and it was Bret Hart winning the championship at WrestleMania, not Lex Luger. So this was also done as a test, and they passed with flying colors, and so they moved ahead, and they set this big match up, the two big babyface stars, one-on-one, champion versus champion, title for title. This had never been done in WWE before, where you had your two big babyface stars, both champions, putting both belts on the line in the main event of a WrestleMania. Every WrestleMania up until this point was good versus evil, right? Good guy versus bad guy, Hogan, Piper, or, Hogan, Mr. T against Piper, Orndorff, Hogan, Bundy in the cage, Hogan, Andre after Andre had turned on him, Savage after he turned, losing the title to Hogan. The formula had worked. The formula had been the same for the first 5 WrestleManias. This was a big departure from what they were used to doing. And Vince McMahon, back then anyway, clearly he didn't really he wasn't a huge fan of doing babyface against babyface because we rarely ever saw it. I think that goes back to the early 80s when they were doing something like that with Pedro Morales and Bruno Sammartino, I think at Shea Stadium, and I don't think the show drew very well, and that really soured them. I don't know about Vince Sr., but certainly Vince Jr., it soured him on this whole idea that, hey, we got to put 2 fan favorites in there against each other. So this really was just different in every way in terms of what we were used to seeing up until this point. And this match just felt like the biggest thing in the world. And you were either a Hulk Hogan fan or you were an Ultimate Warrior fan. You couldn't be both. You had to be one or the other. Me and my brother, he was more a Warrior fan, I was a Hogan fan. Edge and Christian, they've talked about it. Christian was a Warrior fan, Edge was a Hogan fan. You could see Edge in the crowd at WrestleMania VI, wearing his Hulkamania shirt. The battle lines were drawn. I don't think newer fans can really understand how real this was. If you were a younger fan watching this back in 1990. And so as a match, these two had, this match was better than it had any right to be. It was better than anybody imagined it could possibly be. The way it was laid out, they would trade spots back and forth. They did the test of strength, of course. They had this one part of the match where the referee got bumped and, one guy got a visual pin, then the other guy got a visual pin, a very close near fall at one point. Hogan kicked out of the Warriors finish, and everybody at that point figures, well, we all know how this ends. He's hulking up. There's only one way this could possibly end. Everybody else who he's ever hulked up against fell, lost to him, although he never did pin Piper until he got to WCW. Did he pin Piper in WCW? I don't even remember if he pinned Piper in WCW. I'm almost sure he must have. Piper, for whatever it was about Piper, I don't know if it was a clause in his contract or what. This guy did not lose via pin and not just to Hogan, just in general. Piper was very protected and very selective in terms of who he let beat him. Bret Hart is one of the very few people in WWE to ever pin Roddy Piper. I'm sure it happened, but it didn't happen very often. So people thought, well, Hogan's going to drop the leg and win. That's it. Only didn't quite work out that way. Hogan missed the leg drop. We'd never seen him miss the leg drop before. And then on top of that, Warrior gets the big splash, and he gets the pin. The first time that Hogan has taken a clean pinfall loss in a WWE ring since he won the championship back in '84. This is 6 years later. That's a long time. Putting both belts on the line should have been a dead giveaway. That Warrior was going to win this, and probably was a dead giveaway for a lot of people, but not for me. Not for a lot of kids watching that show, and some adults. Because just the mere idea of Hulk Hogan losing in the main event of WrestleMania just did not seem possible. That's why this finish is so shocking, and was so shocking. Not shocking enough I would put it at number 1, but it definitely has a place on this list. Maybe you had to have lived through it. Maybe it's sort of hard for newer fans to understand what's so shocking about this. Believe me, this was a very big, shocking thing when it happened to a lot of people. And of course, after the match, Hogan passed the torch, which Earl Hebner nearly ruined when he tried to hand the WWF title to the Warrior Warrior would not accept it. He had the IC title. He wouldn't even look at Hebner trying to hand him the world title because he knew that Hogan was supposed to be the one to present it to him after the match, not Earl Hebner. Nobody clued Hebner in about that. So it ended up back outside the belt, and Hogan had to go outside, and he retrieved the belt, and he got back into the ring with it, handed it to the Warrior, raised his arm. He did the whole passing of the torch deal. Walked off to the ring cart, took that very slow ride in the ring cart down the aisle of the Sky Dome. In his book, Bret Hart claims that backstage, after the match, Hogan, who he liked at the time and was friendly with, said to him, "You watch, Warrior will fail. And Vince is going to be calling me, begging me to come back." So if Bret is to be believed, Hogan knew that very night that the Warrior was not going to succeed, that the Warrior as champion experiment was doomed to fail. Did he play a part in that? Probably. I mean, I think he's even admitted that he did certain things when that match was over to make sure the spotlight was still on him. Right down to the TV camera showing Hogan on the cart and showing his reaction and focusing not on the Warrior as much where it really should have been, but why are they still focusing on Hogan? He lost the match. I look at that and look, it was a big deal that Hogan lost, so it's only natural that you're going to focus on his reaction. But yeah, I can believe that. I can believe that Hogan knew when he was still in the ring, raising the guy's hand, that in his mind, this guy's going to fail. This guy's going to fail. Vince is going to put the belt back on me. I give it a year at the most. Now, the other interesting thing about this, and this is where my BS meter starts to go off. This is what Hulk Hogan told Fighting Spirit magazine in 2013. I lifted this one passage here. This is what he said. "Vince McMahon and I were best friends, but when we talked about money, we were enemies. So I went to WCW with the red and yellow, I beat Ric Flair, and Hulkamania took off. Then, creatively, I turned into a bad guy, which I always wanted to do in the WWF, but nobody wanted me to. I always said I could be the best bad guy ever, just let me do it, but nobody wanted me to be the bad guy. At Warrior's time, I really wanted to fuck him as a bad guy. I wanted to beat the Ultimate Warrior in Toronto, but as a heel. I just thought it would be intense, and I would be the best bad guy ever. I could have done it and then said, forget the prayers and vitamins, I did it for the money. But it's just creative differences, and Vince knows what he's doing, believe me. I just wanted to try something different in WWE. First of all, I could have done without the image of Hulk Hogan fucking the Ultimate Warrior as a bad guy. I don't care if he wants to fuck him as a good guy or a bad guy. I don't need that mental image. Second of all, I don't believe him. I don't believe him. He had to be dragged in WCW by his own admission, kicking and screaming by Eric Bischoff to turn heel in 1996, when he was clearly past his expiration date when it came to being a babyface. Kicking and screaming. In 96, he had to be dragged. In 90, he was still selling merch. He was still the top babyface in wrestling. You kidding me? He was getting older. Vince wanted to make a new star. So they tried with the Warrior. It didn't work. But the idea that Hulk Hogan, all he wanted to do in 1990 was turn heel. He pitched the idea. He wanted to do it. Vince said, no, I don't buy that. Then last year, he did another interview, this time with Bill Apter, and he talked about wanting to be heel after WrestleMania VI. He said, I was on the fence about turning heel in WCW, but the Hollywood Hogan character, man, that was something I wanted to do after WrestleMania VI with the Ultimate Warrior. I went to Vince, and I said, and I swear this is his quote, okay? This is straight from Hogan. This is what he said. He said, I went to Vince, and I said, I want to be Triple H, Hollywood Hulk Hogan. I want to turn heel. And Vince went, no, man, you can't turn heel. There's no way it would work. I wanted to walk away from the ring, hand Warrior the belt, look up to God, leave the ring, get halfway down the aisle, and then turn around and go back, I guess, to attack the Warrior. That's what I wanted to do, but Vince had other plans. He wanted to be Triple H before there was even a Triple H. I wonder what Triple H thinks about that. I love these little stories and these little anecdotes. I'd never heard that one before, by the way. So that one was pretty funny, I have to say. I hope Chris Hemsworth is listening. I want all of these stories covered in the Hulk Hogan movie that he's doing.